U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin as the Ukraine war enters its fourth year. On Truth Social, Trump condemned recent Russian missile strikes on Kyiv that killed 12 people, including children. He said there was no reason for Putin to target civilian areas and suggested Putin may not want the war to end. Trump hinted at using banking or secondary sanctions if Putin refuses to move toward a peace agreement. The post comes after Trump met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at Pope Francis's funeral in the Vatican. Saturday's meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy was their first since their heated Oval Office clash in February. Despite negotiations, a peace deal remains distant, even as Trump claims he could end the war in 24 hours if elected. Trump described the killings in Ukraine as worse than anything since World War II during his Saturday remarks. Earlier on Thursday, Trump directly pleaded with Putin to stop the missile attacks on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. He said the Russian strikes were not necessary and urged Putin to finalize a peace deal to end the bloodshed. Trump warned that 5,000 soldiers a week are dying and insisted it's time to get the peace deal done. Thursday's deadly attack on Kyiv occurred one day before U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's visit to Moscow. Trump had expressed Easter hopes that Russia and Ukraine could reach an agreement within days.
You said that you were optimistic the other day when you were meeting with Meloni about ending the brutal Ukraine-Russia war.
Yeah.
At this point, based on where negotiations are, what do you think is next in that process? And do you think that the U.S. should still hang on and take part in those negotiations?
Well, I'm going to echo something Secretary Rubio said, which is, look, we've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We've engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We've really tried to understand things from the perspective of both the Ukrainians and the Russians. What do Ukrainians care the most about? What do the Russians care the most about? And I think that we've put together a very fair proposal. We're going to see if the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians are ultimately able to get this thing over the finish line. Again, I feel pretty optimistic about it. I think everybody has been negotiating in good faith, but it's now time, I think, to take, if not the final step, one of the final steps, which is at a broad level, the parties saying, we're going to stop the killing, we're going to freeze the territorial lines at some level close to where they are today, and we're going to actually put in place the kind of long-term diplomatic settlement that hopefully will lead to long-term peace. I'm going to take one more question before the kids start banging on the airplane windows.
So just to clarify, so you want the current lines of war in the war in Ukraine to remain the same under your proposal?
No, I didn't say that. What I said is the current lines, somewhere close to them, is where you're ultimately, I think, going to draw the new lines in the conflict. Now, of course, that means the Ukrainians and the Russians are both going to have to give up some of the territory they currently own. There's going to have to be some territorial swaps. So I wouldn't say the exact lines, but we want the killing to stop. And the only way to really stop the killing is for the armies to both put down their weapons, to freeze this thing, and to get on with the business of actually building a better Russia and a better Ukraine. We're certainly invested in that effort. We hope the Russians and the Ukrainians will meet us halfway. Thank you, guys.